A storm and a stranger. The wind howled a mournful dirge, rattling the windows of Lily's bakery. Rain lashed against the glass, blurring the gaslights of the street into hazy halos. It was a storm unlike any she'd seen in Havenwood, and business had been non-existent since mid-afternoon. Lily had spent the time kneading dough, more out of nervous energy than expectation of customers. She peered through the rain-streaked window, half expecting to see the creek overflowing its banks. Instead, she saw a figure staggering down Main Street. He was tall and broad-shouldered, even hunched over as he was against the gale. One arm was slung across his chest, the other pressed against his side. He looked like a tree fighting to stay upright in a hurricane. Lily didn't hesitate. Abandoning her dough, she grabbed her thickest shawl and threw open the bakery door, battling the wind to keep it from ripping off its hinges. "Hello," she shouted, her voice barely audible above the storm's roar. "Are you all right?" The man turned, squinting against the rain. Even through the downpour, she could see the grimace etched on his face. He stumbled, catching himself on a lamppost. "Need some help," Lily yelled, venturing further out into the storm. The wind tore at her shawl, trying to rip it from her grasp. He nodded once, a curt, almost reluctant movement. Lily rushed to his side, looping his arm over her shoulder. He was heavier than she expected, solid muscle and wet leather. Together, they fought their way back to the bakery, the wind pushing against them like an angry mob. Inside, Lily quickly shut and bolted the door, leaning against it for a moment to catch her breath. The sudden stillness, compared to the raging storm outside, was almost deafening. She turned her attention to the man, leading him towards one of the sturdy wooden chairs near the warm stove. "Sit down," she urged, her voice laced with concern. "You're soaked to the bone." He lowered himself into the chair with a groan, his face pale beneath a layer of mud and rain. A dark stain bloomed on his side, seeping through his thick canvas jacket. "You're hurt," Lily stated, her voice trembling slightly. "Just a scratch," he grumbled, but his eyes betrayed the lie. "Let me see," Lily insisted, her baker's hands suddenly firm and steady. She knelt beside him, gently unbuttoning his jacket. He winced as she pulled the fabric away from the wound. It was a deep gash, jagged and angry-looking. "Looks like more than a scratch," she said, her voice softening. "I'll need to clean this. I have some supplies in the back." She bustled around the bakery, gathering clean cloths, warm water, and a bottle of antiseptic. When she returned, he was watching her, his eyes narrowed. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice rough. "Nonsense," Lily replied, dabbing gently at the wound. "Anyone would have done the same." He didn't respond, just watched her work, his gaze intense. Lily tried to ignore the shiver that ran down her spine. There was something about this man, something untamed and dangerous, that both frightened and intrigued her. "There," she said finally, tying off the bandage. "That should hold for now. You need to rest." "I can't stay," he said, attempting to rise. "Don't be ridiculous," Lily scolded, pushing him back down. "The storm is still raging. You'd be lucky to make a mile. Besides, you need to eat something." She brought him a bowl of her hearty vegetable stew and a hunk of crusty bread. He ate slowly, methodically, as if savoring each bite. "Thank you," he said finally, setting down the empty bowl. "For everything." "You're welcome," Lily replied, gathering the dishes. "What's your name?" "Jake," he said. "Jake Callahan." "I'm Lily Bellwether," she replied, offering him a small smile. "You own this bakery?" he asked, gesturing around the cozy space. Lily nodded. "Been here for 3 years now. My father left it to me." "It's a good place," Jake said, his gaze softening. "Smells like home." Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Where is home for you?" "Jake Callahan. Ranch about 20 miles east of here. Callahan Ranch." He looked out the window at the storm. "Doubt I'll be getting back there tonight." "A rancher," Lily mused. "I don't think I've ever met a real rancher before." "We're not as exciting as the dime novels make us out to be," Jake said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Mostly just long days and hard work." "Sounds honest," Lily said, thinking of the shopkeepers and townsfolk of Havenwood. Their lives were respectable, Certainly, but often fueled by gossip and petty rivalries. Jake chuckled, honest and lonely, especially this time of year. Calving season is coming up, and it's always a scramble. He paused, his gaze distant. It's just me and a couple of hands these days. Used to be more. Lily sensed a sadness in his voice, a hint of a story he wasn't ready to tell. She decided not to press him. Well, she said, changing the subject, you can sleep in the back room tonight. It's not fancy, but it's dry and warm. I don't want to put you out, Jake protested. Nonsense, Lily said again, her tone firm. It's the least I can do. Besides, she added with a wink, I'd rather have a strong rancher sleeping in my back room than a soggy one wandering around in this storm. Jake actually smiled then, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face. It made Lily's heart skip a beat. All right, Lily Bellwether, he said, his voice softer than before. You've convinced me. Lily led him to the back room, a small, Spartan space with a cot and a wash basin. She gave him a clean blanket and a towel. Get some rest, she said. I'll wake you in the morning. Thank you, he said again, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Lily hurried back to the main bakery, her cheeks flushed. She banked the fire in the stove, blew out the gas lights, and retreated to her own small room above the shop. As she lay in bed, listening to the wind howl outside, she couldn't shake the image of Jake Callahan from her mind. There was something about him, something both wounded and strong, that had stirred something deep within her. She knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that her life in Havenwood would never be quite the same again. She just didn't know how much it was about to change. Whispers in the wind. The wind howled a mournful tune around the bakery, rattling the window panes like skeletal fingers drumming on glass. Dawn arrived grudgingly, painting the sky a bruised purple and gray. The storm, far from abating, seemed to have gathered strength, transforming Havenwood into an island lashed by unrelenting rain. Lily peeked into the guest room, a nervous flutter in her chest. Jake still slept, his breathing deep and even. The makeshift sling she'd fashioned from a flour sack seemed to be holding, and the color in his face had improved slightly. He looked younger in sleep, the lines of worry etched around his eyes smoothed away, revealing a vulnerability that touched her. Downstairs, the rhythmic thump of the rain was punctuated by the clatter of her oven. She needed to bake. It was a grounding ritual, a way to impose order on the chaos swirling around her. The yeasty scent of rising dough filled the bakery, a comforting aroma against the storm's oppressive tang. But even the familiar comfort of her work couldn't entirely dispel the unease that had settled upon her. The storm that trapped Jake also trapped Havenwood, forcing its residents into close quarters, brewing anxieties and gossip. Old Man Hemlock was the first to venture out, his weathered face peering into the bakery window as he hobbled past, muttering something about unnatural weather and omens. Then came Mrs. Abernathy, her eyes darting from the bakery's front door to the upper window, a barely concealed smirk playing on her lips. Lily ignored them, focusing on kneading the dough with firm, even strokes. The bell above the door jingled, announcing a visitor. Agnes Grimshaw swept in, her black umbrella dripping a puddle onto Lily's freshly swept floor. Agnes, with her perpetually pursed lips and a voice that could curdle milk, was the self-appointed moral compass of Havenwood. Lily Bellwether, she began, her voice tight with disapproval. Such weather. One wonders what sins have brought this upon us. Lily wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron. Good morning, Mrs. Grimshaw. Can I help you with something? Agnes's gaze flickered upwards, towards the guest room. I should think the question is, can you be helped, dear? A single woman, alone in her house, with a man. She let the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. Lily's cheeks flushed. Mr. Callahan was injured. He needed shelter. Shelter, indeed, Agnes sniffed, opening her umbrella inside the bakery. Some might call it harboring. And for how long, I wonder? A full day now, and the storm shows no sign of letting up. People are talking, Lily. They're saying things. Let them talk, Lily said, her voice sharper than intended. I did what any decent person would do. Decency, my dear, is not always what it seems. Appearances matter. Reputation matters. And yours, Lily, is fragile. Agnes tapped her umbrella on the floor for emphasis. The longer this situation continues, the more difficult it will be to repair the damage. Agnes purchased a single, stale-looking scone. Lily knew she'd throw it to the birds, and swept out again, leaving a chill in her wake that had nothing to do with the storm. The bell above the door seemed to mock her with its cheery jingle. The whispers had begun. Lily could feel them swirling around her, carried on the wind like the storm's relentless rain. Each gust seemed to carry a new, distorted version of the truth. Upstairs, Jake stirred. He sat up slowly, wincing as he moved his injured arm. He looked out the window at the raging storm, his expression grim. "Looks like I'm stuck here," he said, his voice rough with sleep. Lily brought him a cup of coffee, the steam swirling around her face. "It seems so." He took the cup, his fingers brushing against hers. A jolt, subtle but undeniable, ran through her. "I'm sorry for the trouble," he said, his gaze direct and unwavering. "I didn't mean to impose." "You're not imposing," Lily said, but the words felt hollow, even to her own ears. She knew the truth. His presence, however unintentional, was already changing everything. The whispers were proof of that, and the storm, with its relentless fury, was holding them both captive, not just to the elements, but to the consequences of a single act of kindness. The consequences, she suspected, would be far more damaging than any storm. An unthinkable demand. The familiar aroma of yeast and cinnamon, usually a comfort, now felt like a noose tightening around Lily's throat. She attacked the countertop with a scouring pad, desperate to scrub away the memory of Agnes Grimshaw's tight-lipped disapproval. The rain had passed, leaving a diamond-dusted sheen on Havenwood's main street, but the tempest inside Lily raged unabated. An unusual swell of voices drifted from beyond the bakery door. A battle waged within her, curiosity versus dread. Peeking through the window, a cold dread coiled in her gut. A small throng had congregated, their expressions a disturbing blend of worry and morbid fascination. And at the forefront, a self-appointed commander, stood Agnes Grimshaw. Jake materialized in the kitchen doorway, propping himself against the frame. "What's all the commotion?" he rasped, his voice rusty from disuse. "I wish I knew," Lily replied, her hand finding his arm instinctively. His muscles were coiled and ready beneath her touch. "But I have a bad feeling." Before she could elaborate, Agnes Grimshaw's voice, amplified by righteous fury, sliced through the morning quiet. "Lily Bellwether," it boomed. "Come out and answer for your transgressions." Lily's breath caught. Transgressions? Could this be about sheltering Jake? About flouting Havenwood's unspoken code? "Stay put," she instructed Jake, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. He started to object, but she cut him off with a firm look. "Please, let me handle this." Stepping out of the bakery, the bell above the door offered a mocking jingle. The crowd yielded, their eyes like chips of ice glinting in the sun. The air crackled with unspoken censure. Agnes Grimshaw, hands planted firmly on her generous hips, wore a mask of condemnation. "Lily Bellwether," she began, her voice laced with venom, "you have stained the reputation of this town. Common decency has been violated, and the sanctity of our community has been defiled." Lily stood firm, her chin raised. "I've done nothing wrong, Mrs. Grimshaw. Mr. Callahan was hurt. I gave him a roof over his head. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to think." Agnes shrieked, her face flushing crimson. "Think of your standing. Think of the example you're setting for the young girls of this town. Sheltering a strange man, alone, in your house, it's scandalous." A ripple of agreement spread through the onlookers. Lily recognized Martha Perkins, the seamstress, and frail Mr. Abernathy from the general store. Faces she'd known forever, now regarding her with suspicion and disdain. "He was injured," Lily repeated, her tone sharpening with frustration. "He needed assistance." "And what sort of assistance did you render, Lily?" Agnes's eyes narrowed, her gaze sweeping over Lily's form with blatant insult. The kind that demands locked doors and whispered secrets. A hot flush crept up Lily's neck. That's utterly outrageous. Is it? Agnes countered, gesturing towards the bakery with a dismissive wave. The gossip is swirling through town like a dust devil. Terrible rumors are circulating, Lily. Damaging rumors. Let them talk. Lily snapped, but her voice wavered. She understood the destructive power of Havenwood's gossip mill. It could destroy a life. Agnes's eyes sparkled with malicious pleasure. Very well, Lily. If you're so ready to disregard the concerns of your neighbors, then perhaps you'll be equally ready to embrace the resolution they've reached. Lily's stomach twisted. Resolution? Yes, a resolution. Agnes purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. A means to restore your good name, to erase the blemish you've inflicted on Havenwood. She paused for effect, taking a theatrical breath. You will marry him, Lily. You will marry Mr. Callahan. Only then can you absolve yourself of your sin. The decree hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Marry him? Marry Jake Callahan, a near stranger? The notion was preposterous, insane. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm Lily. She felt herself sway, her vision blurring. The faces in the crowd swam before her, a sea of expectant, judgmental eyes. You can't be serious, she whispered, barely audible. Agnes Grimshaw's smile was a chilling display of triumph. We have never been more serious, Lily. Marry him, or face the consequences. Face the shame. Face being cast out. The choice rests with you. The full weight of Havenwood's condemnation crashed over Lily. The bakery bell jingled once more, and Jake Callahan emerged into the sunlight, his eyes hard, his face set in a grim line. He had overheard everything. A proposal of convenience. The blood pounded in Jake's ears, a dull roar that threatened to drown out the shrill pronouncements. He gripped the doorframe, knuckles white, the splintered wood digging into his palm. Agnes Grimshaw's voice, sharp as broken glass, sliced through the afternoon air. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, had simply been too weak to move further from the door after attempting to stand. Now, trapped by his own body, he was forced to listen. The only decent thing, Lily Bellwether, would be to marry the man. Restore some semblance of order to this scandal. He heard Lily's choked gasp, a sound that twisted in his gut worse than the pain from his wound. He shouldered his way forward, ignoring the protesting ache in his side. The sudden appearance of his bulk in the doorway silenced the gathered harpies. Agnes Grimshaw, her face a roadmap of disapproval, recoiled slightly. Mrs. Grimshaw, Jake said, his voice low and dangerous. He pushed himself off the doorframe and stood as straight as possible. I believe you misunderstand the situation. Agnes puffed out her chest, her beady eyes glittering. I understand perfectly well, Mr. Callahan. A single woman harboring a strange man, under her roof, unchaperoned. It's a stain on Havenwood. A stain, Jake repeated, a sardonic smile twisting his lips. The only stain I see is the one you're trying to paint on Miss Bellwether's character. He took a step closer, looming over her. She offered me shelter when I was injured and alone. She acted out of kindness, a virtue I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand. A murmur rippled through the small crowd, a mixture of shock and begrudging agreement. Agnes, however, remained unmoved. Kindness or foolishness? Either way, she must pay the price for her indiscretion. She waved a dismissive hand. Marriage is the only solution. Jake glanced at Lily. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else he couldn't quite decipher. Pity, perhaps? He couldn't bear the thought of her suffering because of him. He turned back to Agnes, his jaw tight. And if I were to offer marriage, would that satisfy your moral outrage? Agnes' eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding her features. Are you proposing, Mr. Callahan? Not in the way you think, Jake said, his gaze flicking back to Lily. He saw the hope blooming in her eyes, quickly followed by a shadow of doubt. He knew what he was about to suggest was audacious, perhaps even cruel, but it was the only way he could see to protect her. He took a deep breath and turned to Lily, ignoring the gasps and whispers of the onlookers. "Miss Bellwether," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, "I am in your debt. Deeply. I have nothing to offer you. No land, no fortune, just a name. But if you are willing, I would propose a temporary arrangement. A marriage of convenience." The silence that followed was deafening. Lily stared at him, her lips slightly parted. He could see the questions swirling in her eyes, the confusion and disbelief. He rushed to explain. "It would be a marriage in name only, Miss Bellwether. A shield against this nonsense. We could seek an annulment as soon as the gossip dies down. I wouldn't presume." He trailed off, suddenly aware of the absurdity of what he was proposing. Agnes Grimshaw sputtered, her face turning an alarming shade of purple. "A sham marriage? Are you mocking us, Mr. Callahan?" Jake ignored her, his focus solely on Lily. He saw the gears turning in her mind, the calculation and the weighing of options. He knew he was asking a lot, perhaps more than she could give. "Think about it, Miss Bellwether," he said softly. "I understand if you refuse, but I can't stand by and watch you be bullied like this." He held his breath, waiting for her answer, the fate of both their futures hanging in the balance. The afternoon sun seemed to hold its breath as well, casting long, dramatic shadows across the bakery floor. The aroma of yeast and sugar suddenly felt suffocating, replaced by the cloying scent of desperation. Leaving town behind, sleep offered no solace, only a swirling vortex of Mrs. Grimshaw's pursed lips and the disappointed faces of the Ladies' Aid Society. Lily rose before dawn, the pale light painting the bakery in shades of gray. Flour dust lay like a shroud over everything, usually a comforting sign of industry, now a reminder of what she was about to abandon. Jake remained asleep in the back room, his breathing shallow and even. She watched him for a moment, the lines of pain etched around his eyes even in repose. He had offered her a lifeline, however fragile. Going back to the main room, she ran through the possible outcomes again and again, just like she'd done all night. Disregarding Jake's proposal meant enduring Mrs. Grimshaw's relentless campaign to ruin her. Her business would suffer, her reputation would be destroyed, and she'd be forced to leave town anyway, branded a pariah. Accepting meant a loveless marriage, a life perhaps even more lonely than the one she already led. But it also meant control, a shield against the storm. With a sigh, Lily started the coffee pot. The rich aroma usually brought a sense of peace, but this morning it only amplified the hollowness in her stomach. She poured 2 cups, adding a generous amount of sugar to Jake's. He was awake when she entered the back room, sitting on the edge of the cot, wincing as he moved. "Morning," he croaked, his voice rough. Lily offered him the coffee. "I've made a decision." He took the cup, his eyes searching hers. There was a weariness in them that mirrored her own. "And I'll marry you," she said, the words sounding foreign and heavy. Relief flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something she couldn't quite decipher. Regret, perhaps? "You understand what this means, Lily? It's not a real marriage." "I understand perfectly," she replied, her voice flat. "A business arrangement. That's all it was." "Good." He drank his coffee in silence, and, for a long time, that was all either of them did. The decision made, there was no time to dawdle. Mrs. Grimshaw was likely already sharpening her claws. Lily moved with a frantic energy, gathering her few belongings. A trunk held her clothes, her mother's silver locket, and a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. She packed a small satchel with baking supplies, a sourdough starter, vanilla beans, and a few essential spices. Leaving her oven behind felt like leaving a part of herself. She pinned a note to the bakery door, closed until further notice. It felt like a death knell. Jake, moving slowly but deliberately, helped her load the trunk onto his wagon. He winced with every movement, but didn't complain. His jaw was set, his gaze fixed on the horizon. As they climbed onto the wagon, Lily glanced back at the bakery. The morning sun caught the window panes, turning them into shimmering gold. It had been her sanctuary, her livelihood, her life. Now it was just a memory. The wheels of the wagon crunched on the gravel road, the sound echoing in the stillness of the morning. Main Street was deserted, the townsfolk still abed. But Lily knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Soon, the whispers would start, the judgments would be passed, and the gossip would spread like wildfire. Jake flicked the reins, and the horses started forward. As they passed the church, she averted her gaze. She could almost feel Mrs. Grimshaw's disapproving glare boring into her back. The town receded behind them, the houses shrinking into toy-like shapes against the vastness of the prairie. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dry grass. It was a world away from the sweet, yeasty aroma of the bakery. With each mile, a sense of trepidation grew inside Lily. She was leaving everything she knew behind, venturing into the unknown with a man she barely knew. What awaited her at Jake's ranch? A life of hardship, isolation, and a loveless marriage? Or perhaps something unexpected? She stole a glance at Jake. His face was impassive, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He was a stranger, a man of few words and hidden depths. Yet, he was now her husband, her protector, her only companion in this uncertain journey. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of fear and a strange, unsettling anticipation. Life on the ranch. The wagon wheels churned a path through the tall prairie grass, each rotation a turning of the page on Lily's former life. Gone were the familiar sights of Oak Haven, the bustling town square, the comforting glow of her bakery windows, the gossiping glances of Mrs. Grimshaw. Now, only endless sky and undulating fields of green met her gaze, stretching towards a horizon that seemed to swallow her whole. Beside her, Jake sat stoically, his arms still in a sling, his face a mask of grim determination. He hadn't spoken much since they left Oak Haven, the weight of their agreement hanging heavy between them. Finally, as dusk began to paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, a cluster of buildings emerged from the landscape. A modest house, a large barn, corrals teeming with cattle. This was it, Jake's ranch, her new home. Lily felt a lump form in her throat. It was isolated, beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, but utterly isolated. The scale of the land was intimidating, dwarfing everything man-made. She, a baker of delicate pastries, felt utterly insignificant in this vast expanse. Jake helped her down from the wagon, his touch brief and impersonal. "Welcome to Callahan Ranch," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "It ain't much, but it's home." The house was more a cabin than a house, built of sturdy logs, its darkened windows like watchful eyes. He pushed open the door, and Lily stepped into a single large room. A hearth dominated one wall, promising warmth against the prairie chill. A rough-hewn table and chairs sat in the center, and a narrow staircase led to what she assumed were sleeping quarters. It was sparsely furnished but clean. "I'll sleep in the barn," Jake stated flatly, shattering her thoughts. "The barn? But your arm." He shrugged, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "It's temporary, until things are settled." He gestured vaguely. "There's a bed upstairs. I'll bring up some blankets." Lily watched him limp out, a knot of confusion tightening in her stomach. This was not the gallant hero she'd envisioned, but a man deeply uncomfortable with the situation, eager to maintain a distance. The following days were a blur of hard work and unfamiliar tasks. Jake, despite his injury, insisted on teaching her the rudiments of ranch life. She learned to milk a cow, her initial squeamishness giving way to a grudging respect for the animal's placid patience. She mucked out stalls, the stench initially appalling, but soon becoming just another part of the landscape. She even learned to ride a horse, clinging on for dear life as the animal loped across the open fields, the wind whipping through her hair. It wasn't easy. Her hands, accustomed to the soft feel of dough, became calloused and rough. Her back ached, and her muscles protested with every movement. But slowly, a sense of accomplishment began to bloom within her. She was learning, adapting, surviving. She also began to see a different side of Jake. Gone was the guarded, weary man she had first met. Here, on his ranch, he was in his element. He moved with a quiet confidence, his eyes scanning the horizon with an understanding that came from years of experience. He knew the land, the animals, the rhythms of nature. One evening, she found him in the barn, tending to a newborn calf. His large hands were gentle as he cleaned the animal, his voice soft as he murmured reassurances. Lily watched, mesmerized, as he coaxed the calf to nurse, a tenderness in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "They're fragile things," he said, noticing her presence. "Need all the help they can get." "Like people," Lily replied softly. He looked at her then, his gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Sometimes, he conceded, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Sometimes, even the strongest need a little help. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. Lily knew that life here would never be easy. But as she watched Jake, his face illuminated by the lantern light, she realized that it might not be as loveless as she had feared. Perhaps, in this harsh and unforgiving landscape, a different kind of connection could bloom. A connection forged not from romance, but from shared labor, mutual respect, and a quiet understanding of the land that bound them together. The question was, could she be satisfied with that? Hidden talents and growing feelings. The rhythm of ranch life settled into a predictable, if demanding, pattern. Lily's hands, once adept at kneading dough and frosting cakes, were now callous from mending fences and tending to the vegetable garden she'd carved out near the creek. The garden was her sanctuary, a splash of vibrant color against the muted browns and greens of the landscape. She found solace in nurturing life, in coaxing tomatoes and beans from the stubborn soil. One afternoon, seeking respite from the relentless sun, Lily wandered into the barn. The familiar scent of hay and leather usually calmed her, but today, a different aroma hung in the air, the sharp, clean smell of wood shavings. She followed the scent to a far corner, half hidden behind a stack of worn saddles. There, amidst a scattering of wood scraps, sat Jake. He wasn't mending tack or sharpening tools, as she expected. Instead, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was hunched over a piece of wood, a small, curved knife dancing in his capable hands. The afternoon light streamed through a gap in the barn wall, illuminating the object he was shaping, a small, intricately carved bird, its wings outstretched in mid-flight. Lily stopped, mesmerized. She hadn't known. Jake, startled by her presence, looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and something akin to embarrassment. He quickly tried to hide the carving behind his back. "I didn't mean to intrude," Lily said softly, stepping closer. I smell the wood." He hesitated, then slowly lowered his hand, revealing the bird. "It's nothing," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "Just something to pass the time." "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, genuinely awestruck. The detail was exquisite, the feathers meticulously rendered, the bird small, glass, eyes seeming to hold a spark of life. "You're very talented, Jake." He shrugged, the compliment clearly making him uncomfortable. "Learned it from my grandfather. He used to carve toys for me when I was a boy." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Didn't seem important." He picked up another piece of wood, avoiding her eyes. Lily watched him for a moment, sensing the vulnerability beneath his gruff exterior. "It is important," she insisted gently. "It tells me something about you that I didn't know. Something beautiful." He finally looked up, his gaze meeting hers, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken words. The following days found them working together, not just on the necessary chores, but on smaller projects. Lily, inspired by Jake's carving, decided to try her hand at whittling. He showed her how to hold the knife, how to follow the grain of the wood, his large hand briefly covering hers, sending a jolt through her system. As they worked, they talked. Lily shared stories of her life in town, of the bakery, of her dreams of opening a tea room someday, a place filled with the aroma of freshly baked scones and the gentle murmur of conversation. Jake, in turn, spoke of his childhood on the ranch, of his love for the land, of the challenges and rewards of raising cattle. He spoke of his grandfather, the old man who had taught him to carve, and the lessons he had learned about patience and resilience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they sat on the porch, watching the cattle graze in the distance. Lily was attempting to carve a small rose, her brow furrowed in concentration. Jake sat beside her, whittling another bird. "Do you ever regret it?" Lily asked quietly, not looking up from her work. "Regret what?" "Giving up your life for me. Marrying me." He was silent for a long moment. "I did what I thought was right," he said finally, his voice low. "And I don't regret having you here, Lily." She looked up, her eyes meeting his. "Even though it's not what you wanted?" He hesitated, then reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes," he said softly, his gaze lingering on her lips, "what you want changes." A warmth spread through Lily, a feeling she couldn't quite name. It wasn't the grand, sweeping romance she had once dreamed of, but it was something real, something solid, something that was growing between them, like the seedlings in her garden. It was a connection forged in shared labor, in quiet conversations, in the discovery of hidden talents and unexpected vulnerabilities. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. Or perhaps it could be more. False accusations. The biting wind whipped around Jake as he rode out to check on the north pasture. He'd felt a prickle of unease all morning, a sense that something was amiss. The herd had been restless the past few days, more skittish than usual. He'd chalked it up to the approaching storm, but now the silence was deafening. He crested the small rise and stopped dead. The pasture was a scene of chaos. Cattle milled about aimlessly, their low moans echoing across the barren landscape. Several were hobbling, their legs tangled in what looked like freshly laid wire. Others were bleeding, small puncture wounds marring their hides. Rage, cold and sharp, clawed at him. Someone had deliberately crippled his herd. Years of careful breeding, of building up his stock, threatened in a single, malicious act. He dismounted, his boots crunching on the frozen ground as he surveyed the damage. The wire was new, too new to have been there by accident. Someone had planned this. He spent the next few hours tending to the injured animals, his jaw clenched tight. Lily, seeing his grim face when he returned to the house, rushed out to meet him. "Jake, what is it? What's wrong?" He told her, his voice flat with fury. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Jake, no. Who would do such a thing?" Before he could answer, a voice boomed from the edge of the yard. "Callahan, I need to talk to you." Dusty Rivers swaggered towards them, his face flushed, his eyes narrowed. Jake straightened, his fists clenching. "What do you want, Dusty?" Dusty stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping over Lily with thinly veiled contempt before returning to Jake. "Heard about your little problem. Shame. Though I gotta say, I'm not surprised." "Get to the point, Dusty." "The point is, Callahan, you need to watch who you let wander around your property, especially late at night." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "Someone saw Miss Lily sneaking around the north pasture last night. Said she was carrying a spool of wire." Lily gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "That's a lie. I was here with Jake all night." Dusty smirked. "Is that so? Maybe she was just restless. Couldn't sleep. Decided to take a little stroll under the moonlight." He turned his attention back to Jake. "Just saying, Callahan, you might want to think about who you're sleeping under the same roof with. Some folks ain't as innocent as they look." Jake's blood ran cold. He looked at Lily, searching her face for any sign of deception. He saw only shock and hurt. He knew, deep in his gut, that she was telling the truth. Lily wouldn't do this. Not to him, not to anyone. He turned back to Dusty, his voice dangerously low. "Get off my land, Dusty. Now." Dusty chuckled, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Just looking out for you, Callahan. Don't say I didn't warn you." He spat on the ground and turned to leave, his swagger a little less pronounced. As Dusty rode off, Jake turned back to Lily, cupping her face in his hands. "I don't believe him, Lily. I know you didn't do this." Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you, Jake. But Who would do such a thing? Someone who wants to see me fail, he said grimly. Someone who has something to gain. He thought of Dusty's smug expression, his veiled threats. The man had always been jealous of Jake's success, his bigger herd, his better land. That evening, after Lily had prepared a meager supper, his mind wasn't on eating, but he knew she needed the normalcy. Jake saddled his horse again. "Where are you going?" Lily asked, her voice tight with worry. "I'm going to find out who did this." He rode straight to the north pasture. He needed to see the damage again, to look for anything Dusty might have missed. He dismounted and began to walk the perimeter, his eyes scanning the ground. It wasn't long before he found something, a set of faint tracks leading away from the fence line, heading towards Dusty's property. The tracks were partially obscured by the wind and the blowing snow, but they were there, and they were fresh. He followed the tracks for a short distance until they disappeared into a rocky wash. He knew he couldn't be sure, but a feeling of certainty settled over him. Dusty was behind this. He had no proof, not yet, but he would find it. He owed it to Lily, and he owed it to his herd. He turned his horse back towards the ranch, the wind biting at his face. He had a plan forming in his mind, a plan to expose Dusty for what he was. But he needed to be careful. Dusty was dangerous, and he wouldn't hesitate to retaliate. This was more than just about damaged cattle now. It was about protecting Lily and protecting everything he had worked so hard to build. A love that endures. The air, heavy with pine needles and simmering rage, pushed against Jake as he urged his horse toward Dusty's ramshackle dwelling. Every strike of hoof against the parched earth hammered home his determination. He wouldn't let Dusty's deceit fester and corrupt the budding trust between him and Lily. He'd spent half the night unraveling the inconsistencies in Dusty's tale. The too flippant mention of the injured cattle, the self-satisfied gleam in his eyes. It all coalesced into a single, damning truth. Dusty was responsible. He found Dusty idling on the porch, idly shaping a piece of wood. "Callahan," Dusty drawled without rising, "to what do I owe this visitation? Come to beg forgiveness for your lack of faith." Jake dismounted, his jaw clenched. "Spare me the theatrics, Dusty. I'm aware of your role in my cattle's mutilation." A dry, grating sound served as Dusty's chuckle. "Agrave okiesaschin, hake." Got more than a baker's fancy to back it up. Jake tossed a small, intricately carved wood shaving at Dusty's feet. Identical to the surrounding scraps, this one bore a dark, reddish-brown stain. "Found it snagged on the wire near my wounded herd. Resembles blood mixed with your carving stain." Explanation. Color drained from Dusty's face, his smirk dissolving. He faltered, "I don't know how that got there." "Don't underestimate my intelligence," Jake said, his voice a low growl. "You engineered this, didn't you? An attempt to bankrupt me, using Lily as your pawn." Cornered, Dusty shed his pretense. "So what if I did? That coddled city girl doesn't belong here. She's nothing but trouble, and you were a damn fool to take her as your wife." Jake surged forward, seizing Dusty's shirt front and yanking him upright. "Never speak of my wife in that manner." He slammed Dusty against the shack's weathered boards. "You will confess to this. Publicly." Dawn painted the town square with nervous anticipation. Agnes Grimshaw stood amidst a cluster of disapproving women, their faces masks of condemnation. Lily stood isolated, her shoulders bowed, steeling herself against the impending rejection. The glares thrown her way felt like physical blows. Jake arrived, dragging a recalcitrant Dusty in his wake. He planted him in the square's center and addressed the assembled townsfolk, his voice ringing with conviction. "I brought Dusty Rivers here to make a confession." Dusty, his face bearing the marks of a brief altercation, mumbled, "I crippled Jake's cattle." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Agnes Grimshaw's mouth worked, but no sound emerged. "What?" Jake pressed, his gaze unwavering. "I wanted to destroy him," Dusty hissed. "And ensure that woman," he spat, gesturing towards Lily, "was chased from this town." Jake pivoted to face Lily, his eyes locking onto hers. "Lily Bellwether is blameless in this affair. She isn't innocent, deserving of our respect and protection." Turning back to the crowd, He continued. I was wrong to doubt her, even for a heartbeat. I apologize to my wife for my failure to trust her implicitly. She saved my life, and she continues to illuminate it. An insult to her is an insult to me. Silence descended, broken only by the distant chirping of insects. Lily stared at Jake, tears blurring her vision. The raw honesty, the fierce defense. It pierced through her carefully constructed barriers. Later, as twilight deepened and the echoes of gossip faded, Lily sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset blaze across the horizon. Jake joined her, easing onto the swing beside her. Jake, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, what you did today, it meant the world. He took her hand, his rough fingers twining with hers. You didn't deserve any of it, Lily. I should have trusted you implicitly. She turned to him, her heart swelling. I think I'm falling in love with you, Jake. The confession escaped her lips, a truth she hadn't realized she was ready to voice. A slow smile spread across Jake's face, erasing the hard lines etched by years of struggle. I think I'm already there, Lily. I resisted admitting it, but I am. He framed her face with his hands, his eyes searching hers. This marriage, it began as a matter of practicality, but it doesn't have to remain that way. Do you want to remain married, Lily? Do you want to build a life with me, a real one? Lily didn't waver. Yes, Jake, I do. He lowered his head and kissed her, a kiss no longer dictated by duty, but by burgeoning affection and nascent love. The kiss was tender, promising, a seal upon their shared future. Standing hand in hand on the porch, watching the first stars prick the inky canvas of a night, they understood that the road ahead would be challenging. But they also knew they would face it as one, their love a guiding star in the harsh, unforgiving expanse of the West. No longer strangers yoked by circumstance, they were partners, ready to forge a life, a family, a love that would endure the test of time.